You ready? Okay. Kim, are you...
I'll take you for a ride from a garbage truck. I'll be your garbage man. I'll take out your junk and I'll flush it down. Mr. Pilgrim! Fly! Scott earned the power of love.
Well, I have to go for one of them, which is, it's in one of his movies where the fight sequences really are a highlight, and you've got the CD behind you. I'm going with Scott Pilgrim versus Gideon Graves at the end of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Well, you see in a lot of the fights in that movie, Scott remains on top of things for most of the times, and this is the only fight in the movie where you feel like Scott could lose. And he ends up losing, and as a result, Wright kind of makes fun of the video game style where you end up skipping the cutscene to get to the final boss. And then you're treated to not only an incredible fight, but you get a great message about doing stuff not to earn affection from someone else, but doing it for your own self-respect. And he shows that in a really fun way that would let the intended audience who's watching the movie take on that advice. And you cheer at the end when Scott finally takes down Gideon Graves, and Schwartzman, he just kills it as this smarmy club owner who's going to steal your girlfriend. And I reckon if Jesse Eisenberg wasn't cast, Jason Schwartzman probably would have made an awesome Lex Luthor.
The Lucas Lee fight in Scott Pilgrim at Casalova. Yeah.
Yes, I like that he outsmarted him. Like, they made it so that one of the tasks wouldn't just be brute force.
Yes. And Chris Evans totally hamming it up.
Oh, yeah.
And I loved the part where, like, there's this whole thing where when they film movies that are supposed to be based in New York and Canada, they always, like, erase the CN Tower and put in the Empire State Building. But in this fight, there's a backdrop of New York, and he kicks Scott through the backdrop, and it knocks out the Empire State Building, and you can see the CN Tower in the background.
That's pretty cool.
Like, I love that he just thinks about little things like that.
You have to, like, acknowledge the Matt Patel fight because...
Yes! I thought that I almost picked that one.
It introduces us to the whole thing. He may not have been a contender, but, like, it was, like, right away, we're like, okay, well, the only person who thinks this is weird is Scott's sister.
Yeah.
Encourage behavior. People don't die, they just become coins.
Yeah.
Yeah, demon hipster trick, like, it's like, okay, so now anything's possible. You know what I mean? Like, it was just a great way to open things up.
And, like, nobody's used to seeing Michael Cera like that, so it was just cool to see him, like, fighting and kicking ass, and, like, you do not see him like that at all.
Yeah, again,
so that was really cool.
His sister's reaction when he wins is just like, oh, okay.
Okay.
I like that. I also really like the I'm Matthew Patel.
Yeah.
I love that. I love Scott Pilgrim with this one. I love Edgar Wright.
The cutaways too is like, that's perfect because it informs you while it's setting up a fight scene, which you don't really usually see, where it's just doing it. You really dated this guy aside while it's a standoff.
Yes.
Like, it's.
You also get to see a little bit about Scott too. Like, didn't you see the email?
My choice, the obvious choice, but the best choice in my opinion, is gonna be the "Don't Stop Me Now" fight from Shaun of the Dead. That shit is hysterical. Like, it's the best, I think, example of him timing up music with action for comedy. It's just hilarious, like everything that they're doing with like hitting them on beat, and then when she smashes them in the face with the fire extinguisher and blows them in the face when it says explode. Like,
the one dude is doing percussion with the breaker switches. It's like do, and you have the lights like a light show. That is
it's just like a really good scene, and it's like so funny when he gets hit in the head with the dart, and they're all working together trying to like fight this horde of zombies that's coming in. Yeah, Billy said something about the dart at the same time. But for me, like, that's the first thing that comes into my head, and largely in part to that awesome Queen song being meant. It was the perfect choice.
Hot Fuzz when Simon Pegg comes back to the town and he like raids the weapons locker, all the confiscated weaponry, and like rides into town on the horse, and is gonna basically, you know, like show them like how it's gonna be, and just love how he embraces all of the action movie tropes that he was criticizing earlier in the film, you know, like doing the whole like dive with the two, like, you know, pistols, you know, out to the side, and all of the little one-liners like it's straight out of every 80s and 90s action film, and like all the callbacks to earlier moments from the film. I just think that's just a glorious scene, and there's so many great fight scenes in that movie, but just him riding into town on the horse with the gun strapped to his back.
The woman,
you know,
on
it
her
means
bike,
business.
The woman on her bike with the two pistols is just, it's just
like that.
glorious.
For a little small hamlet in England, they are packing some serious heat. You wouldn't expect that.
Can't we stop this mindless violence?
Yes, yes.
But I'm actually going to go with really any of the shootout scenes in Hot Fuzz. It's very hard to do any action scene and make it effective. I know this because I've actually tried to do that, and I've made terrible films, none of which you will see because I have them locked away somewhere, but there were some action in it, and they did involve shoot 'em up scenes, and I gotta give credit where credit is due. It's not just the director, although he's a big part of it. The cinematography has to be very good, and practical effects are always great. Blood squibs especially. I'm a big fan of blood squibs. But yeah, the Hot Fuzz action scene are not only, you know, there's always some humor in it, but they're all bosses. It's just...
I do have to say that my favorite fight in Hot Fuzz is actually the grocery store fight with the Yarp guy and stuff. The Yarp guy, by the way, I don't know if any of you guys have noticed this, but that is the dude who plays the Hound on Game of Thrones. Just deal with that for a second.
Yarp?
The dude, right? Yes, that's so crazy to me. Like, he does such a good job. Like, he is two completely different people in that movie and that show, and that's excellent acting. But I just love, like, the puns, like, chill or cool it or whatever he says when he's, or you should have said this. Like, it's so funny.
Supermarket scene in Hot Fuzz. I mean, the whole last, like, half an hour of Hot Fuzz is an action scene, but I think specifically the whole bit in the supermarket is, like, my favorite. You get some crazy action, you get weird stuff getting thrown around, you get a little hand-to-hand combat in there. So I think it's you know, not only one of the best, but it has like the most to offer too.
Yeah, we were actually talking about that fight scene. That's also my favorite fight scene from Hot Fuzz. So good, it's so funny, every second of it great.
Yeah, a lot of good action and a lot of good jokes like in the action, and that's when it's done best, you know.
Yes.
And even like the butchers just throwing knives, because that's naturally what you would have back there. Like, there's all the
well, yeah, they're playing into like bad guy cliches and like people with gimmicks and stuff like that, and that's I love all that.
The same one Brian said, where it's the fight scene in the supermarket, because I love the little things like there's a GIF of it that I use for everything, and it's the one when Nick Frost is loading the shotgun, he's just like, shame. And then when the guys behind the meat counter start throwing the knives, and one of them, when the Andys think one of them is hit, and he starts freaking out and shooting and like unloading, and the other one who looked like he's like, Andy's okay, it's just bolognese. Because they hit a jar shattering with bolognese sauce.
What I really love about that fight is how much like a video game it really feels, because like you have like the guys behind the counter throwing the knives, and like the whole thing feels like a video game level where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go after the big boss now, and like you guys stay here, like in a raiding party kind of like.
Well,
wow.
and they at one point link all the carts together and battering ram the freaking meat counter with all the freaking shopping carts. So it's just this beautiful, like, amazing fight scene that is cut so masterfully. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's great about Edgar Wright is that you can tell that he loves making movies, but more than that, you can tell that he loves watching movies, and that he really appreciates, like, paying homage to movies that inspired him to make movies. And I think that that's just, like, we all love movies, and to see somebody who obviously like feels the same way making movies that is amazing is really inspiring, I think.
Yeah, I don't think you could ever say that Edgar Wright is a lazy filmmaker.
The whole in-fight sequence from Hot Fuzz. Like, I super love. Okay, so everybody's already said. Like, I'm only gonna just kind of reiterate like how masterful this guy is when it comes to shooting action. But it's also the shit that you don't like. He doesn't shoot. Like, I love it. Like when he immediately goes to the hoodies, and you don't like you don't really fucking excuse me. You don't really focus on the hoodies or anything, but you know kind of what, like it's that, I don't know, that whole in-fight sequence from start to finish. Like I can't even like hone in on a small part of it because like that, like she's right. Like
it's consistent and nonstop. Like he just like he goes for broke, that guy.
Like from the second he gets the farmer.
Yeah.
And he calls his mom.
The farmer's mom.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, while Shaun of the Dead might be through and through our favorite movie, like that, just for that end fight sequence, like I get so excited to watch that movie. Like how, like, yeah.
I love when like the neighborhood planning association, like the people who are there to judge like the best village, they come by and it's all in shambles. They're like.
Also, with the ending of that movie, like the part where he gets in the fight with the guy and then the guy gets impaled.
Yes.
Like the whole thing, and then he's like quiet for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden, whoa, like in pain. It's so hysterical, like I can't. And we were talking about how that movie might be even like gorier than Shaun of the Dead was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no way.
The whole fight scene at the end of Hot Fuzz is beautiful because it's also when you see Simon Pegg arriving in the horse, when they fight in the bar. Then they fight in the grocery store. But my favorite scene of all of that finale is when when Simon Pegg is fighting Timothy Dalton in the mini version of the town.
Yeah.
And then he's pushing on the same thing that he killed the reporter. But in the mini version of the church, he says, "Oh, this hurts a lot." And then we see my favorite scene when Nick Frost doesn't want to shoot his father, and then he does the Point Break thing. So that is my favorite scene of all of that fight scene.
The bathroom scene.
Yes.
Like for me, I feel like that's one of the best fight scenes in any movie, let alone an Edgar Wright movie. Like his fight scenes are obviously like really like cataclysmic. Like he wants to level up as much damage in every frame, in every shot that he can. Like especially in Scott Pilgrim, like they just fucking go for broke in that film, and it's awesome. Because like it's entertaining to watch. It never looks like, I mean, it always looks choreographed and it always looks clean. Like it never looks like it's like sloppy where you can't really tell. Like if you ever watch like the original Old Boy versus the new Old Boy with like Josh Brolin, like he looks tired like fucking 2 shots in, man. Like he's like got the hammer, you know, like but like Old Boy, like he sees them coming and he's able to interact with them as soon as they hit him. And I feel like that's very much how the bathroom scene is in World's End, except my favorite part is how precisely choreographed each character is. Like each individual character has his own style of fighting, and it's like playing like Tekken or something, but like watching it, I don't know, like my #1 favorite person in any fight scene ever is Nick Frost in that bathroom, because that guy, like, he mows through those kids. Like, he mows them down. Like, he comes in swinging. Like, you see it start, and, like, you see Simon Pegg, and you're like, something bad's gonna happen, and something bad starts happening, and then, like, everybody gets involved, and he fights like fucking Donkey Kong, man. He's like, grab, smash, grab, punch, smash, kick, smash, break. I'm like, oh, it's so good. Like, every punch and, like, every hit is just, like, perfectly landed. I don't know. It made me so excited. Like, that is definitely my favorite part of that whole movie. Like, that whole movie took a couple of times to grow on me to a place where, like, it got close to my heart. But, like, man, like, every single character fights the way that you would expect him to fight. Yes, Peter just hides in the bathroom stall. Because Peter's like, fuck this shit, I'm out. Turtle, like, he's not trying to deal with it. Because that's who he...
I was saying before with World's End, like it felt like they took what he like everything, like all the choreography they learned from Scott Pilgrim and just multiplied it by 50 and applied it to everyone in the room.
They turned it up to 11.
They destroy that bathroom.
God.
Oh, dude. And I love that their plan is like, no, we're just gonna keep drinking. We're gonna.
It's fine.
Then they're gonna know that we know.
Yep.
So we just gotta keep doing it.
Yep. Just keep it going.
Which
Wait
is great
for everything to blow over.
Which is great exposition.
Exactly.
forced down your throat. You know what I mean? Like, it's just be like, this is why we're doing it, because.
And I feel like that's a very British mentality too. Just like keep going, don't want to cause any problems.
Yep, keep calm and carry on.
In The World's End, the bathroom fighting scene, they're so to their own characters. And one of my favorite things, and like they mentioned this in the commentary, is I don't think Pete never lands a hit until he goes to the woods and he beats up that guy. So like,
Bully, yeah.
Yeah. So the bathroom scene is so like, it just perfectly portrays each of them so well, especially because I think my favorite thing about that is that Pete's hiding in the stall while, while everyone else is fighting. And just the fluid movements and like, it's just such a cool scene to watch. Like, I really enjoy it.
And again, any other movie would have made that very
gratuitous.
Thank you. But the fact that they used the blue goo instead just made it like, interesting and visually pleasing. Whereas, like, if it was just straight up gore, it would have been like, that doesn't look realistic. That doesn't. But here.
I think he's just right. I don't think he's underrated because I kind of feel like everybody who goes into an Edgar Wright film, you more or less know what you're going to get into. I don't think he's overrated because like there's like, all right, if he was overrated to me, like there's like this really shitty like hacky like Hollywood director who did like a good movie one time. The guy who did you know what I'm talking about? What's his name? Max Plains. I'm not a big fan of him.
He only wrote.
Right. He's overrated.
But
overrated.
he seems to be working on that for himself, though.
And I kind of feel like
he seems to be dialing it back a little bit.
I feel like if you're an overrated Edgar Wright, you get to Max Plains. Nobody wants that. That's true.
Well, you know what I'm gonna say. He's obviously just right. I can't fault Edgar Wright for anything he does. He's my favorite director of all time. Because when you're watching an Edgar Wright movie, you're never bored for a second of it, and you can still analyze it like you would a classic film, and you can just tell he's got such a passion for filmmaking, and I love it when directors can do that. So for me, Edgar Wright, he's just right.
I'm also going to say he's just right, and the reason I'm going to say that he's just right is because you have a certain expectation when you go to an Edgar Wright movie. You're looking for certain things to be a certain way, and he always delivers that. And when someone lives up to the expectations that you have, I think that means they're just right.
Yeah, you both pretty much nailed it. I mean, I always expect to see cool transition sequences.
Great music.
I always expect laughs. And I always expect something to like, not mind blowing, but for something for me to go, oh man, that was so good. Like when Scott Pilgrim jumps out of that window when Knives is looking for him, and he's like, oh, he just stepped out, and it's like, shh. I'm like, I wish I could have written like that into a scene where it's like he just jumps out the window and he's fine.
Visual comedy's the way forward now, and no one does it like Edgar Wright does.
Well, I'd say just right. Like, he is underrated, but I think that makes him just right. I feel like if he got too big, he would probably fall prey to like studio interference, and he might not get to do the projects that he'd want to do in the way that he wants to do them. So I feel like the level where he's at right now, he's able to create awesome things that we all love, and he still has his creative freedom to do what he wants.
For sure. Yeah, I guess not being under like a magnifying glass kind of gives you more of a freedom stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first thought about this question, I thought I was leaning more towards underrated because I dressed up as Shaun of the Dead for Halloween, and no one knew who I was. So that was fun. And so I did go towards underrated, but I think overall, I think I'm going to have to go with just right, because I think, although I do love every one of his movies, I do think that maybe his stuff isn't for everyone, and I think we really, like they were saying earlier, we have the Cornettos and we have Scott Pilgrim, so I think maybe and I don't wish this on anyone, but maybe see something like not as successful first to say whether someone's overrated or underrated. I think we don't have enough yet to say.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I'm glad that you don't want that.
Of course not. I love Edgar Wright, and I'm so excited for Baby Driver, and my friends all think I'm a crazy person.
Compliment your pun work there. I like your wordplay. I like the way you guys do business.
You're welcome.
This is probably where I'm going to get a little controversial here, I think. Oh, if you've seen my show, you know I'm all about these. Oh, I scared Tom just up and left. That's terrible. That's a terrible reaction. I really love...
So what are you going to say? Go for it. We can take it.
I really love the Cornetto trilogy. I think those are great movies. I think there's a real similarity to them. I think because he hasn't put out a lot of big mainstream content, we're basically looking at 4 movies, and really like Scott Pilgrim. I only saw it for the first time a couple months ago, and I think there's a difference between seeing it when you're a certain age and when you're an adult. There's certain characters in that movie that are just downright insufferable to me, and I love the look of the movie. It's shot beautifully, everything, the special effects, the way they're used, the way everything's done is so cool, and I get all that, but unfortunately I was just like, this subject, it's just rough for me, you know? So I think I'm gonna have to say that he's a little overrated, because the movies he's made are so beloved that it makes it so it's hard to look at his complete body of work and kind of take everything into account.
Ha! As a fan of puns, you know that I love that question more than any of the others. But I think he's actually underrated. Most people I talk to, they don't seem to know who he actually is. They seem to know what movies he does, because a lot of people surprisingly know about Scott Pilgrim, which I love because I've been a fan of the comics. I got all 6 volumes right here. I'm trying to find it on Blu-ray, but I do have it on DVD. And I also saw it in theater. But really, he's not like a mainstream guy. He just sort of goes off and does his own thing. While, I mean, he's brilliant, but he's just sort of flown under the radar, and he gets this huge cult following, you know?
Yeah.
But he's a director with talent. He's also got some gorgeous hair, and anybody who dates Anna Kendrick is a boss. I'm just saying that right now. And yeah, I think oh yeah, and he has a copy of Ant-Man's first appearance, like framed. So the dude's just a pretty awesome guy that really needs to be recognized more, not just for his work, but just for being an awesome guy. Because he seems just really down to earth, and yeah.
I do want to say about Scott Pilgrim, the reason that I do have a big place in my heart for that movie is that it is dated in the most wonderful way, because we're 30, and when that movie came out, that is exactly the way that like hipsters that I know acted. Like, that is painfully my generation and the people that were in my subculture at that time. Like, if we did like have kids or grandkids one day and they wanted to know like, oh, what was it like to be in your 20s at this time, like I would put that movie in, because he ridiculously just nailed exactly what it was like to be that age in that time. Like, he knocked it out of the park with that.
The game culture, the music culture, the
just
fashion,
everything.
The
censorship, with apathy of being anywhere, just the whole thing. Like, yes.
The hardships of being an adult in Canada.
Yeah.
First of all, I love your wordplay. It's adorable. Second of all, I think that he's underrated. I feel like if Edgar Wright had some beans in a pot, right? And like each director in Hollywood had beans in a pot, I feel like you could scoop out like half of Quentin Tarantino's beans and put them in Edgar Wright's pot. That's just my personal opinion. I feel like Quentin Tarantino has way too many beans in his pot. Like, way too many. Like 9 times the number of beans he should have. And Edgar Wright has like a third of the beans he should have. Perhaps a half. but probably more like a third. Had he done Ant-Man all the way through, it might be a half a pot of beans, but he needs a whole pot. That's just my 2 cents.
I think he's underrated, but I think that's a good thing. Because I'm going to use 2 other examples of directors that are like huge geek directors, and then there are directors, and there's your geeky directors that pay homage to the geeky tropes and the jokes and the things that we get as like nerdy geeky people. Being like what exploding and becoming a huge deal did to them, like Sam Raimi for starters. Like he became huge, and then he started getting super burnt out, and Spider-Man 3 shows it. I mean, he's the musical number. And he stopped really doing stuff for a little while. And Joss Whedon was the same way. He blew up overnight practically. And then because he was so overwhelmed from people online and studios and scheduling and everything else, Age of Ultron suffered because of it. I'm going to say part of it was the script too, but you can tell some of it is like, because a bad script can be saved by a good director. I'm kind of glad Edgar Wright's not that big. Like, he didn't catch on and become like this huge sensation. He's a big sensation with people that know who he is, but he's not like this mainstream Hollywood sensation. And I'm kind of glad, because I don't want it to ruin Edgar Wright. Going back to the previous comment where he still has an eye of someone who enjoys watching movies. If he gets burnt out, he may not have that eye anymore, and that would like fundamentally scar what he can do as a director.
Right on.
Yeah, I think Joe
right
said,
on.
Yeah, I think Joe said it very eloquently. I also agree that he's underrated, but my perspective matches more what Billy said earlier, just because not a lot of mainstream movie fans have heard of him. Like, they may have heard of Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz or Scott Pilgrim, but main people that are, just casual movie fans, or even if they go to movies regularly, they're, not a lot of people pay attention to directors' names, cinematographers. I mean, they're, we're kind of like that kind of depth of knowledge. But average, I could go to my work right now and ask, hey, are you excited about Baby Driver? And they were like, what are you talking about? Like, what kind of movies are you watching? Like, Edgar who? Like, what is wrong with you? Like, who? What? I don't understand. So I think definitely underrated, just because, like Joe said, his star hasn't risen to that level yet where he's a household name. Even, with his work on Ant-Man and then leaving that, I don't think that elevated him. But again, what Joe said makes a lot of sense. It's actually a good thing, because when you do rise too high, what does that do to your creative soul, and what does that do to the process, that you could lose something. So I don't want that to happen to Edgar Wright. Please don't get too popular if you're watching.
Another great episode. Wait, it was the right episode of Odd Shapes Panel. It was really cool getting to discuss the Cornetto trilogy and the movie of our generation, Scott Pilgrim. Thank you so much for joining us. You can always talk to us on Twitter at OddShapedPanel or
at SJ Plus Junkie.
About anything. What do you want to see? Talk to you soon.
And thank you guys all so much.
Yes.